Good morning, interminglers, and welcome to our next episode of Flattening the Learning Curve, brought to you by Intermingled Mesh Crochet. This morning, I want to talk to you about having windows in your project that don't look like they're windows that Jack built. We've all heard the story of the house that Jack built. Well, when we're developing our intermingled mesh, or any mesh actually project in crochet, one of the things that we run into is that the windows of the mesh actually are slanted and they look a little zigzaggy here. See how we can see that? Our windows slant. One goes this way, one goes that way. This is inherent to crochet, especially when we're using the higher stitches and we're developing a mesh platform. It can be avoided readily. And I'd like to address that with you today. So again, we can see here we have slanted stitches. What I'd like to get us to today is one where they aren't quite so slanted. And this is actually a somewhat flawed example, because I actually did this with 9 windows, and this is with 10, because I wanted to show you that use this for another thing later on. But you can see here, you can't look at the first row because that's always going to slant as long as you're building that off of a chain. You don't have the stitch construction that you would need to straighten that stitch the same way you do these. But you can see how the stitches are straightened out in this mesh box versus this one here. So we're going to address that today, and I actually am going to take this one out and bring over a working piece. And I want to talk to you for a minute about, the differences there and why it matters. So this is fine, if that doesn't bother somebody and that's the effect that they want this almost like a chevron look to their stitching, then that's perfectly fine. However, when we're dealing with the intermingled mesh and the interlocking mesh projects, we're trying to create a picture. And in those pictures, we actually often have boxes that we might really want to be more squared off. I've used the method that I'm going to show you today to create this block here in all of my stitches. You can see that these are nicely squared windows in this mesh. Likewise, on the reverse side of this, the boxes are well squared. We don't have the slanted sides. When you're doing an intermingled mesh or wacky weave or interlocking crochet or fillet crochet, any of these double layered or single layered crochet, but in this case would have to be a doubled. If all of the boxes are filled with lines, you don't have the same problem. This is one of Hilda Stein's patterns, but as you can see, we don't get those windows. We don't have that issue with that. We have the issue when we start doing things that have obvious windows to them. Okay. This here is a working example. And what I discovered is I actually, form my crochet stitches, or have been forming my crochet stitches using double crochet stitches using a yarn over, hook into the chain, hook over, draw the loop up, yarn over through 2, yarn over through 2. Was actually causing additional slant to my double crochet stitches, which we can see here. So this was when I was doing a hook over versus a yarn over, and this is when I had the revelation this morning that, I'm supposed to be just going, yarn over, yarn over, yarn over. And it's slight, but it's there. So anyway, let's get to this. We can readily address the slanting or the skewing of our stitches with a very simple technique. And I'm going to walk you through that. So, all of the intermingled mesh patterns begin either with a chain 4, or if you prefer chain 3, or if you prefer, as I do, a twisted double crochet, which is what I'm doing here to start this last row of this 10 by 10 mesh. Okay, so that was my twisted half double crochet. All right, if you look at the construction of a half double crochet or any of the higher crochet stitches, such as a half double crochet, double crochet, treble crochet, all of those will have the same stitch construction where you normally, standardly, you go into the chain space and then you yarn over, well actually, sorry, where you yarn over, go into the chain space, pull up, yarn over, pull up, through 2, through 2. That and chain 1, double crochet. Chain 1 is our interlocking stitch. So that's just standard. That creates a stitch that actually slants. You can't see it here because there's not another one to compare it against. However, what we want to do to straighten out these stitches is to go into that special little loop that the higher stitches provide for us. The reason that they are slanting to begin with is because when we create it and we put it here into this chain space, it's actually slightly off center, right, to the post of the double crochet below. So when we create that here, especially in mesh where we have a looser platform to be working on, it sets it off here to the left of that post. And when we turn this work around and we work it the other way, it's putting it actually to the opposite side of where this one ends up going. So you end up with that zigzag that goes on. So when we go into the standard of going into this chain 1 space, it is offsetting it from this post here. This is most obvious in these mesh because that also allows space for the stitch to move around. So it really does, especially in the if you have a loose gauge, it allows it to move around in here. So to avoid that, what we do for a half double and for our half double crochets or any of our higher stitches is we yarn over, we create our double crochet, but we're going to go into this special third leg here that's provided in the higher stitches. You can see it there. It's you have your chain space, and then you have your special little locking loop there that we can use to straighten out our stitch. So we're going to go yarn over into that special little locking loop. We'll call it a locking loop, and that's going to, as you can see, that's creating it right over that post. So go into that locking loop, yarn over, draw up, draw through 2, draw through 2, chain 1. That just created our double crochet directly over the post of the double crochet below. That, my friends, is how we are going to straighten out those windows that Jack built. So let's just do that one more time, and I'm going to work across the row because I actually want to talk to you about one more thing that is inherent to doing this if you do go into that locking loop. Okay, so let's go ahead and do those. I actually did the yarn under. working on my phone, so I can't pause the video the same way I would with my camera, so you'll have to bear with me as I go across these 10 windows. So what I'm doing here is just my double crochet chain ones across as though I were doing a intermingled mesh. I realize that many other mesh projects that are not the double layered, you might have a double crochet chain too. Hopefully you can see my hands clearly. This isn't intended to teach how to crochet, solely to straighten out our stitches, so forgive me that I'm trying to move through this. I'm also trying to break myself of the habit of going in here and doing a hook over instead of a yarn over, because come to find out that hook over that I'm so used to doing, just because that's just how I've always crocheted, adds slant to the stitch, which apparently, topic for another day, straightens the seam when you're working in the round. Who knew? You probably did. I didn't. Okay, last couple here. Okay, so into the locking loop. So here's our chain space, here's our locking loop that allows us to go straight up over the double crochet of the row before, yarn over, not hook over, cover up, finish off our double crochet, chain one, and then I'm going to double crochet into the twisted double crochet I have on the end, which keeps my edge stitch nice and straight. All right, so this piece is actually 10 by 10 and it's done. All right, let's look at it. Again, maybe a chainless, and also a topic for another session, but maybe a chainless foundation might help straighten that out. But you can see that these are a lot straighter and squared off than these. Now, that brings us to my other point. Both of these are knit or crocheted with the same fiber, just different colors. This is the cottonese. Both of them are done on this G hook, and both of them are 10 windows by 10 windows. This one is done with the standard double crochet chain one into the chain space of the double crochet below. This one is done in the method that we just talked about. And while our gauge, and it's hard to tell, our gauge is approximately the same on the width. Maybe actually I did this a little looser, but the gauge is approximately the same on the width of the block. Unless I'm holding it wrong. Yep. So the gauge is the same on the width of the block, just about. But when you go into that locking loop, you are shortening this stitch, the effect of this stitch overall, and your gauge is going to be affected. As you can see, I have almost what looks like almost a complete extra row at the top of that green. I do not. This is 10 by 10. The other one's 10 by 10. So do not start doing this in the middle of a project, and always make your gauge block, if one's necessary, which I would argue it virtually always is. Always do your gauge block using the method that you're going to use in the project, because it will make a difference. And that's what I have for you today, is how to avoid these windows that Jack built. Jane did it better. Have a great day. Be well and be at peace.